The most cruel aspect of dimensional lowering attacks is not the overwhelming firepower, but that the victims cannot comprehend what has happened to them until their bodies are vaporized. In September 1916, at the Battle of the Somme, 300,000 corpses filled the mud. Yet the front line did not advance even a meter, as the British and Germans prepared to continue sacrificing lives to fill the trenches. An A-10 Warthog attack aircraft, 60 years ahead of its time, opened the overcast sky. Let's conduct an extreme thought experiment, throwing a modern weapon of mass destruction into the WW1 meat grinder. This is not mere firepower. It's a miraculous dimensional lowering strike, utterly depriving the human senses of that era. Below, German soldiers are still tending their water-cooled Maxim guns, unaware that the strange cross overhead is locking onto their body heat with infrared cameras. The pilot presses the launch button. A Maverick missile streaks across the sky, and within seconds, 6 German heavy-forward howitzers that had bombarded the British lines for days, along with their massive steel barrels and crews, are vaporized in a gigantic fireball. The shockwave topples nearby sandbags, and hundreds of thousands of soldiers freeze, staring at the rising black mushroom cloud. But this is just the appetizer. 3,900 depleted uranium rounds per minute, 65 per second, slice through German trenches like a chainsaw. Early tanks, with armor only a few millimeters thick, are like paper before this fire. Concrete bunkers crumble. Machine gun emplacements are erased physically. Surviving soldiers experience total sensory deprivation. Their brains cannot process the scene. In just 3 minutes, the Warthog destroys fortifications that conventional bombardment had failed to breach in a week. British trenches erupt in deafening cheers, assuming the war might end that afternoon. In an era without aviation fuel, a physical deadlock, more chilling than facing 3 million enemies, quietly seizes the throat of this dimensional lowering machine. German soldiers, ears shattered, eyes scorched by the blinding fire, cannot see what flies above. They think some invisible terror has erased their senses. But if God exists, He's not plucking a harp in heaven, He's tallying a cold ledger. At the Somme, the British spent $50,000 daily on shells for German positions. Hundreds of thousands of rounds churned the mud but did not advance the front even a meter. From high above, the A-10 pilot sees the struggle of carbon-based life like inefficient barbarians fighting among themselves. The steel beast, valued at $1 million in 1916 equivalent, fully loaded, begins its dimensional calculation. One Maverick launch costs $180,000 in real money. Each shot burns cash, but the return is staggering. In 3 minutes, infrared targeting flattens 6 heavy artillery pieces and reinforced command posts, wiping out $2.5 million in German military assets instantly, saving weeks of blind shelling and thousands of corpses. But the fuel gauge creeps toward red. When it exhausts its last drop and crashes heavily onto the muddy runway, it faces a permanent deadlock, unable to revive. Even if the A-10 annihilates millions of dollars in enemy firepower within an hour, the British Empire cannot win the war this way. Spending $180,000 in modern missiles against a few $1,000s worth of WW1 artillery is financial suicide. Worse, when the plane lands, expended of ammo, the pilot realizes the true death threat is not German flak but the unrelenting physics and logistics. The early aviation fuel provided by 1916 ground crews would destroy the engines if used. Without proper JP-8, the aircraft is a one-time disposable weapon. Its 1,174 DU rounds fire out in just 18 seconds at full rate. Wing-mounted guided missiles are finite and irreplaceable in a pre-transistor era. In 90 minutes, the A-10 burns 11,000 pounds of fuel, destroys dozens of fortifications, and obliterates $5.6 million of German military assets. Impressive, but across a 400-mile western front, with 3 million German soldiers and 15,000 artillery pieces, this strike removes only 0.1% of enemy combat. The A-10 is miraculous locally, but globally it's merely a needle piercing an elephant's hide. This is the despair of war. No single black tech weapon can solve complex systemic problems. It's like using a smartphone to command spear-wielding primitives. Technology, no matter how advanced, cannot bridge the temporal chasm. The A-10 strike terrifies soldiers psychologically, but for how long? 24 hours, 48 hours at most. Once reserves arrive, new artillery is emplaced, machine guns are remounted, and the stalemate resumes. Muddy trenches remain. Death marches continue. If the A-10 appeared in 1916, could it change anything? The short-lived dimensional strike leaves only an unsolvable riddle, no deeper impact on the blood-soaked land. When the futuristic aircraft, stripped of fuel and ammo, lies like scrap metal in the muddy French fields, the harsh truth emerges. The 400-mile trench line, filled with millions of lives, cannot be turned off by a few precise missiles. A superplane spanning eras clears all obstacles in sight, yet cannot end the war, even a minute earlier. The A-10, as isolated as ever, is a needle piercing an elephant's skin, painful, but incapable of altering the grand scheme. Looking at this lonely superplane in the WW1 mud, one can't help but relate. Staring at a glowing phone at 2 a.m., tangled projects, a cold bank balance. Have you ever dreamed of a divine force flattening your mess instantly? So now answer. Facing life's insatiable black holes, do you wait for a miracle that will never come, or bite your teeth and wade into the mud to carve your own bloody path?